With just a few short posts spread across all social media platforms and adding a couple soundtracks to the Nintendo Music app, the Pokemon Company surprised everyone with the announcement of the first classic Pokemon games released for the Switch with Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. This is of course in celebration for their 30-year anniversary. Pokemon has often released older games on newer hardware or with remakes around big events like this. And so yeah, it isn't too surprising that we are getting a retro release, but this is a big deal and is surprising and very important because it has now opened the door for the future of classic Pokemon on modern hardware, which to me personally, I have been waiting for this since like the Switch 1 came out, just for any classic Pokemon games at all, and almost a decade later, Nintendo and Pokemon are finally letting us get our hands on these games with official modern Nintendo hardware. What is up everyone, I am Felix the Fox, and this is how I think Pokemon will handle the future of classic Pokemon games on the Switch and how Pokemon Home will integrate with that as well. So with the same social media post we talked about earlier announcing the rival of these games, Pokemon and Nintendo also simultaneously divided their entire fanbase, which they have gotten quite good at, I might say. The comments were full of people discussing is probably the wrong word here, but lots of fans confused about why these weren't coming to the Nintendo Switch Online GBA expansion pass. Why are we getting these games so late into the Switch's one life cycle? I mean, the thing is barely holding on to itself. Why are we doing Kanto again? And the obvious topic to get everyone riled up was the price point, which is always a fun thing to talk about in the era of modern video games, but we will get to that just later in the video. I really want to start with Nintendo's decision to not put these games on NSO with the GBA expansion pass. So if we are being honest, it makes a ton of sense to release these games standalone and not on the GBA. When the GBA emulator was first announced, I was pretty ecstatic because I, along with a lot of others, assumed this is how Nintendo was going to release classic Pokemon games. But that never happened, and obviously we know now that this is why, but I think the real reason is two other factors that have kind of been prevalent from the start and I should have noticed sooner. Obviously, Pokemon Home integration. These games would need to be standalone just like all the others that connect to Pokemon Home, just for that reason alone by itself. And reason two is that these games cannot be on NSO because of how the gameplay mechanics work. So basically in these Nintendo Switch Online games, you have the ability to use rewind features, save states, pause menus, and all that fun stuff that comes with the E-word, which makes playing games like the Lost Levels so much easier. But for an official Pokemon game, that doesn't really work. If you have ever played Pokemon using the E-word, then you know how these type of features can break the game, but also make it really, really enjoyable, and that's what makes it so fun to play over and over again. But for an official game, going to be compatible with Pokemon Home and other things like trading and battling with local wireless communication, then yeah, you have to release these games standalone. I know a lot of people out there I've talked to bought the GBA expansion pass for these games alone, and I can't believe I didn't realize this sooner because this is the most logical step for Nintendo to make. Now, more about Pokemon Home. I think this may tie into the price a bit as well, but again, I will touch on that later. But basically, if these Pokemon are going into Pokemon Home, then I think Nintendo sees this as giving us 151 more Pokemon to put into Pokemon Home. Even though there are two games out on the Switch right now that have all those same Pokemon and can be put into Pokemon Home. But those two are mainly for remakes and a more of a 3D aesthetic in general. Anyways, the Pokemon accessible in Fire Red and Leaf Green, besides the original 151, are what I think a lot of people are excited for, and I think a big reason why it was priced this way, because we are getting Pokemon in the Sevi Islands we haven't had access to for a while. Kinda. I mean, that's the only real benefit I can think of for special Pokemon to put into Home. So, now the question we're all asking, what comes next? The Pokemon Presents comes out soon, so maybe we'll get some few answers there. But if not, what is next for Pokemon? So, yes, we started off with Fire Red and Leaf Green, so the most logical step would be Heart Gold, Soul Silver. But if you remember, we already got remakes of Gen 4. So Nintendo would then have to justify not releasing just a platinum version if they're going to release Heart Gold, Soul Silver. Then you get into the argument, if they're just going to release Heart Gold, Soul Silver or a platinum version also by itself, then what's the point of Gen 5 remakes besides quality of life improvements? This begs the question, what are they going to do moving forward? If you have any ideas, please let me know in the comments. But the last point I really want to discuss and kind of ties everything back together is to answer the question, why is Pokemon doing Kanto again. Like, okay, I get it. If we are going to release OG Pokemon on modern hardware, then Gen 1 has to come first. Well, like, you know, the first Pokemon have to come first. That makes sense, especially all the points I discussed earlier about Pokemon Home. A good majority of Pokemon fans have already experienced Kanto on Switch with the Let's Go games, and despite the flaws of those games, I think Kanto looks phenomenal in these games, and like genuinely, I think they did a good job, and the 3D aspect of that game really brought Kanto to life in a new way, but those are remake focused. But right now, yes, now we are going back 20 years in time, and for some Pokemon fans, this will actually be their first time playing a 2D experience with Kanto. And you always have to consider that aspect, and that's amazing, really. I'm so happy these are coming to modern hardware for those fans. And okay, if you want to argue about the E word and how you can like play it on your phone and that whole argument, then okay, look, hear me out. Think about all of the ROM sites Nintendo shut down last year and all the anti-piracy policies they have. Not only that, but all the other fans out there who don't really care to learn how ROMs, mods, or emulation works in general, these fans are finally getting a chance to play these games again, or experience them for the first time. Same for the later games like Heart Gold Soul Silver or Gen 5. I'm begging on my knees Pokemon for Gen 5 remakes. Anyways, to make my point, allegedly, I probably played Fire Red and Leaf Green probably 3 times a year every year since I was in college, and usually all 3 of those alleged run-throughs are on different platforms. So yeah, for some of us, this isn't like rocking the boat in a new way, if you catch my drift, but I think for all the fans out there, especially the younger ones who these games are the target audience for, by the way, that don't even know what a ROM is and just play the games their parents can buy them, this is a huge deal for those casual consumers. For the casual fan that can afford it, this is actually an amazing deal. Kind of. To conclude this video, the only thing I'll say about the price, to avoid too much negativity, is that a certain game called Hollow Knight Silk Song, a game that released last year, by the way, and when it released, it crashed every main digital gaming store it released on, including the eShop, by the way, peaked at over 500,000 players, is probably one of the best Metroidvanias ever made, has over 60 hours worth of content made by 3 people, by the way, isn't 20 years old, and is also priced at, yeah, Nintendo's about to make that bag though.